Demon Slayer is one of the most visually stunning anime of the last decade. From the intricate sword techniques to the heartbreaking sacrifices, it's very easy to see why it's become such a global sensation. But beneath the dazzling animation and emotional storytelling, there's a problem that's much harder to ignore. Terrible character writing, particularly with its women, who are written through an incredibly misogynistic lens that limits their agency, depth, and narrative importance. Demon Slayer consistently undermines and fails its female characters. And while good character writing might not be as flashy as a fight scene, it's just as important to talk about because it speaks to something bigger about the anime genre as a whole. To understand why this matters, let's start with some context. Demon Slayer is a shonen series. Shonen literally means for young boys, but more than a demographic label, it reflects a way of telling stories shaped by the male gaze and male-centered tropes. For example, most shonen anime feature a male protagonist characterized by some kind of power or ability that others them from their peers. The female characters are typically the passive support characters, love interests, or motivators for the hero. The author of Demon Slayer, Gotoge, grew up watching shonen anime such as Naruto, Bleach, and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which they've stated greatly inspired Demon Slayer. They struggled with earlier works that failed to gain traction, and their then editor suggested that Demon Slayer should deliberately be designed to be simpler and more approachable to a broader audience. And while that made it a global hit, it also meant that many of its characters, particularly the women, were written in shallow, reductive ways that were easy to digest. This is also a series set during the Taisho era of Japan, which was a time when women were legally and socially subordinate to men. On top of that, Japanese cultural norms around gender roles still influence much of anime today. So, when we look at how Demon Slayer treats its female characters, we're not just looking at one series, we're looking at a reflection of both its historical setting and wider storytelling trends. Within this video essay, I am going to go through why I think the women in Demon Slayer are not good female representation, specifically looking at Shinobu, Mitsuri, and Nezuko as examples. I won't be talking about anything past the Hashira Training Arc to avoid any spoilers for anyone waiting for the movies. Take Shinobu Kocho, the insect Hashira, as my first example. On paper, she's incredibly fascinating, calm, calculating, almost playful in her cruelty towards demons. She's a fan favorite for her wit and elegance, but if we look closer, her very design and its portrayal highlights how the series undercuts its female fighters. Shinobu is the only Hashira who can't decapitate a demon. Instead, she uses poison because her body is supposedly too weak to swing a blade with enough force. But these physical limits don't seem to apply to the men in the series. In Season 1, Tanjiro learns water-breathing techniques that let him slice a boulder weighing hundreds of kilos at the age of 14. Later, we see Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke reach feats of superhuman strength through sheer willpower and training, being able to move said size of a boulder a whole foot with their bare hands. Yet Shinobu, one of the most elite demon slayers, isn't afforded that same possibility. Her insect-themed abilities are also pretty telling. The other Hashiras all wield powerful, commanding styles like flames, water, or stone, and Shinobu gets butterflies. A delicate and overly feminine aesthetic that reinforces the idea that women can only fight if it's pretty, graceful, or indirect. I'm not denying just how beautiful her breathing style is. She's actually my favorite of the Hashira, and she's obviously super powerful. It's just disappointing that the only two female Hashira are both reduced to overly feminine strengths. She does at least get a backstory. Her sister, the former Flora Hashira, was killed by demons, and Shinobu took up her mantle, balancing vengeance with the compassion her sister embodied. It's more than most women in the series receive. But just because it's better than nothing doesn't mean that it's good writing. She's still framed as weaker and an exception rather than an equal to the other Hashira. This brings us to Mitsuri Kanroji, the love Hashira. Mitsuri is a walking contradiction, but not in the interesting sense. She's introduced with exaggerated physical proportions, a tiny waist and arms, and oversized hips and breasts, which are later explained by her supposedly dense muscles. There are frequent sexual scenes where her features are emphasized to cater to a male audience. Even her combat style is based on flexibility, which conveniently allows the animators to pose her body in ways that sexualize her during battle too. Her very title being the Love Hashira is also pretty telling. She's coded from the start as a character defined by romance and desire, rather than strength or skill. Compare that to flame, water, or wind. It's pretty clear which one was designed with a woman and fan service in mind. Then there's her backstory. This really irritated me. We are told Mitsuri struggled to find a husband because of her strength and her appetite made her unladylike, and she has pink hair, which was allegedly off-putting. But the series itself constantly shows men doting on her, admiring her, and treating her as beautiful. The story tells us that she was rejected, but what we see on screen totally contradicts this. If her design had actually leaned into her being physically larger, more muscular, or visibly intimidating, that story might have actually resonated. Instead, we're left with a supposedly tragic past that doesn't line up with her hyper-feminized appearance. This could have been a storyline that many women relate with, the struggle of not feeling feminine when society has a set notion of what a woman is, but instead she is reduced to an overly sexualized character whose only desire is being loved by men. This motivation of wanting a man to love her feels cheap. In a story about life and death struggles, about overcoming grief and despair, Mitsuri's core drive boils down to wanting to be someone's wife. That's not just disappointing, it's reductive. Nezuko, the series' central female character, is perhaps the clearest example of how Demon Slayer strips women of agency. From the moment she becomes a demon, she's literally silenced, gagged with a bamboo muzzle and locked in a box. She loses her voice, her autonomy, and even her choices, as Orokodaki hypnotizes her into seeing all humans as her family, so she can't even decide for herself whether to resist her instincts. She's treated like less of a person and more like a pet that Tanjiro carries around. She's praised when she follows orders, patted on the head, and protected at all costs. When she's finally allowed to fight, her demon form sexualizes her body, her chest expands, her kimono slips, and vine-like markings curl across her skin. The vines alone could have been a powerful visual metaphor for her resilience and ability to adapt and flourish, but instead they're paired with the kind of fan service design that feels uncomfortable, especially when you remember that Nezuko began this story as a 12-year-old and couldn't be any older than 16 during this fight. And when she loses control during the Entertainment District arc, she needs to be reined back in by Tanjiro. Once again, her power is framed as something that must be contained, controlled, or suppressed by a man. Nezuko's journey could have been about a girl fighting to reclaim her humanity, but instead is about a girl whose power is constantly restrained and managed by her brother. And it doesn't stop there. Uzui's 3 wives are introduced during the Entertainment District arc, and they had potential. 3 kunoichi with specialized skills infiltrating the district on a dangerous mission. Instead, they're reduced to damsels, tied up and waiting to be rescued. Afterwards, their entire identities collapse just into being Uzui's wives, with no real exploration of their skills, personalities, or backstories. Their outfits are sexualized far beyond the disguise of infiltration, making them fan service props rather than serious operatives. Even the girls at the Butterfly Mansion aren't totally safe. Zenitsu constantly gushes over how cute they are, Aoi even gets slapped on the butt by Uzui, and the series plays it all for comedy. But these are meant to be young teenagers. The humor relies on sexualizing them, even if subtly. Among the demons, we see similar patterns. The Spider Mother demon is abused, broken down, and killed for being weak. I initially thought that Daki seemed like a refreshing change. She was burned alive as a young woman for speaking up for herself and being assertive, and she survives to become a powerful demon controlling her own territory. But even here, the story undercuts her agency. Instead of letting her stand as a terrifying villain in her own right, she's tethered to her brother. She becomes whiny, childish, and dependent on him, begging to be saved. For one of the only female upper demons to be written this way feels like a wasted opportunity. I thought she was so cool until her brother showed up. Powerful women in anime are often reduced to objects of fan service to make their strength digestible to a male audience, sidelining their agency and power in favor of physical appearance. It's really tiring to constantly see the exact same kinds of women in every single show. Especially within the world of Demon Slayer, where many of the male characters are actually quite transgressive and really well-rounded, such as Tanjiro, who on top of being incredibly strong, determined, and noble, is also an excellent cook who cares for others, is very empathetic, helpful, and loving, which aren't typically masculine traits. Just to be clear, this isn't just Demon Slayer's problem. Naruto gave us Sakura, whose entire role revolves around Sasuke, and Hinata, whose life's purpose is defined by her devotion to Naruto. One Piece makes nearly every woman look identical, impossibly thin waists, enormous chests, long legs, and rarely gives them the same narrative weight as the men. Animes like Fairy Tail and Fire Force reduce women, and I use this term lightly as most of the characters are actually children, to endless fan service. My Hero Academia's women are sidelined in favour of its male-heavy cast, and over-sexualized to cater towards the male audience despite also being teenagers. This is a trend across the medium. Women in anime are too often accessories, love interests, comic relief, or tools to motivate male heroes. And Demon Slayer, for all its beauty, follows that same pattern. But it doesn't have to be this way. Attack on Titan gives us Mikasa, whose loyalty and strength stand on their own, and Hanji, a brilliant leader whose eccentricity masks deep wisdom. Freyren presents a powerful mage wrestling with immortality and memory, free from male-defined goals. Studio Ghibli has always written women as full, complex people, such as San from Princess Mononoke, or Chihiro from Spirited Away. Even Madoka Magica gives us magical girls with layered, tragic, compelling arcs. These examples prove that complex, strong women and girls can be written into anime, but sadly they remain exceptions. So what does all this mean? Demon Slayer is a series of highs and lows. Its animation, music, and emotional beats are extraordinary. But when you step back and look at how it treats its women, the pattern is pretty clear. Shinobu is undermined, Mitsuri is sexualized, Nezuko is silenced, other women are just fan service damsels or supporting props. Even the female demons aren't allowed to stand alone without a man overshadowing them. I want to hear what you thought. Did you think that Demon Slayer failed its female cast, or do you think their roles still hold weight in the story? Let me know in the comments.